We're talking hardball, the bull and the better. Talking hardball, part of Betting Weekly. Handicappers, they're all in the know. Pick some winners and then we say let's go. So come on, it's time to watch the show. We're talking hardball, Ken Griffey's grotesquely swollen jaw. We're talking hardball, over under on the hot dogs. Talking hardball.
Live on a Monday afternoon. It's 2 p.m. Eastern where I am. Wes, you're in Indiana. So that's you're in the Central Time Zone. I should know this, right? Or do I have that wrong?
I'm actually in Las Vegas. My heart is in Indiana based on what happened with the Pacers last night, falling in 7 games to the Thunder. So it's a good thing I'm talking baseball today because I'm all cried out when it comes to talking basketball.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaker. I get it. And we do have Betting Weekly Fast Break coming your way at 3 p.m. Eastern. So where you are, obviously, it's 11 a.m. right now. But we'll leave the basketball talk for the next hour so we don't get you even more depressed after just the heartbreaking loss last night. It was a great series, but that's coming up later. But there is a lot of baseball to talk about. It is Betting Weekly Hardball, part of the Betting Weekly studios under the Bet Rivers umbrella. I'm Adam the Bull. He's Wes Reynolds. And Wes, I know you got 2 picks you really like today, but we're going to look at all the games at least briefly and, see what we can make out of it. And if you have a question or a comment for us, hit the YouTube chat and we will read it at some point. We've got Alex and Z producing with us today, and let's jump right into it. First actual game of the day, if we go to, not time-wise, the first game of the day is the Rangers and Orioles at 6:35. It's not, I'll tell you, there's not one. I mean, from a gambling standpoint, there's always something you can find. But in terms of sexy pitching matchups, there are none today, Wes. There's no game with 2 good pitchers going, really.
No, not at all. And I think no more evident of that than Patrick Corbin and Trevor Rogers here to kick off the card at 3:35 Eastern. That is Texas and Baltimore. And, Baltimore, rough goings there in Yankee Stadium on Saturday, where they almost got no hit by the combined of Clark Schmidt and the bullpen for the Yankees. So Orioles, they played a little bit better lately. They're 33-44. They weren't the disaster they were, I think, about 3 weeks ago. Rangers keep, getting above and below 500 basically, and they just keep going back and forth. Rangers offense really struggling. They didn't do much really in Pittsburgh, even though they took 2 of 3. Baltimore rough going into Yankee Stadium. I think the market's about right. Small lean to the over, but no bet for me in this one.
Yeah, one of the most shocking things this year has been the disappointment has been the Rangers lineup. I mean, obviously they've had a lot of injuries this year, but you expected this to be one of the better lineups, and it's been far from that. I mean, Wyatt Langford's been good. Josh Smith, who came out of nowhere last year, has been solid. And, Evan Carter, when he's been healthy, has been solid. But, Garcia, Josh Young, Jake Berger, Marcus Semien, these guys have all been – Jock Peterson, who's hurt right now, has been absolutely horrible. Seager's been a big disappointment, and he's been injured. So what you thought coming into the season would be one of the best lineups in baseball has been anything but. And that's where they're middling.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're kind of waiting because in that West, it feels like, Houston's not pulling away. Seattle's not pulling away. So it doesn't feel like Texas is out of it by a long shot, even though they're 2 games under 500 midway through the season. But they're kind of a holding pattern team for me. They're getting a little bit of the support in the market, at least from the overnight. Still dangerous to, I think, support Patrick Corbin on the road. So I'm staying out of this one.
All right, next game I wanted to jump into, you got the Cubs at the Cardinals tonight. And speaking of pulling away, it had looked like the Cubs were maybe starting to pull away in the division. However, they've just dropped 3 of 4. And overall, they have, they were 38-22 So they've gone 8-9, and so under 500 the Cubs in their last 17 games. By the way, this has really nothing to do with gambling. It's just kind of odd. This is the first time the Cubs and Cardinals, longtime rivals, they played each other as much as anybody. They've been in the same division forever. It's the first time they're playing each other since August 4th of last year. So they've gone almost 11 months without playing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
These two longtime rivals, but you got to give it to the Cardinals, and I'm
Yeah.
personally a Reds fan, so they're treading water at anywhere around 500. But
Yeah.
the St. Louis Cardinals, nobody expected. And I was like, these guys are going to be sellers. These guys are going to absolutely be sellers at the deadline. I don't see them. It's an older team. They don't seem to have the star power that they're used to having there in St. Louis. But they find ways. They find ways to win. That's just a good organizational culture. I know that sounds cliche, but that's what it is. And they find themselves 6 games over 500 right there in the Central. Bren Brown and Liberator, the matchup today.
Yeah.
I would lean a little bit under on this one. 9 minus 20. I think Bet Rivers is currently at 8.5. But it's used to the over, so it could dance between that 8.5 or 9. I think 9 and 7 are really the two key numbers on totals. I would need a 9 to bet the under. If it was an 8.5, I would pass here. But I think Ben Brown on the Cubs side, this is a guy that's been a little bit of a hard luck pitcher, I think, Adam, because when you look, he's got good stuff. He averages over 10 strikeouts per 9 innings, but he gets hit hard. And he allows a lot of hard contact, 372 on the batting average, balls in play. And that's one of those quote unquote luck metrics that I look at where there's a little bit of regression potentially towards the positive looming, because you see him and he's got a 6 ERA, but he's only about 3.5 on the xFIP. That's a fielding independent pitching. And that I think is more indicative of how a guy is pitching. So I think Bren Brown may have a little bit of positive regression coming his way. The market certainly believes so, because Cubs have flipped to a favorite overnight. So if I can get under 9 at minus about 15 or minus 20, that's where I'd go here. But at Bet Rivers currently 8.5, so it's a pass for me at that number.
Yeah, I agree with you on Ben Brown. As a Cubs fan, I watch him quite often, and the numbers don't make sense. You see the 6 ERA, and you're like, this guy should not have a 6 ERA. It is weird, but nonetheless, they'll play tonight. I'm going to skip ahead to the Yankees and Reds, because you mentioned you're a Reds fan. The Central has 4 teams over 500. The AL East does as well. So does the NL West. I think a lot of people expected it in the AL East and the NL West, but not in the NL Central. The Cardinals are a surprise, and I guess to some degree the Reds are. I don't know. Maybe they're kind of about what I thought they'd be. But Yankees had lost 7 of 8 before winning their last 2 against the Orioles. Nick Lodolo is going to pitch for Cincinnati. Alan Winans, who was claimed off of waivers from the Braves in the offseason, makes his 2025 debut. Obviously, that should favor the Reds, who are at home in terms of the pitching matchup. What are you thinking here?
Yeah,
you stay away from your own team, Wes. Sorry to cut you off, but as a bettor, do you try to avoid? Because I think naturally we're all likely, when you're making your bets, you try to keep your biases out of it. It's a little harder to do that when it's your own teams. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, not necessarily. Okay. It's not something that I necessarily, I feel like I have the ultimate insight, so I'm going to bet on or against them in every single game. That's certainly not the situation here with any of my own teams, Reds being included here for the purpose of this conversation. But when I looked at this game, I wasn't necessarily sure what to do, because you mentioned Alan Winans making his debut for the season. How long is the leash for that Aaron Boone is going to give him in this one? Because, you always want to give your starter and have your starter give you a little bit of length, but Yankee bullpen not really heavily used over the weekend, considering that Clark Schmidt went 7 innings of no-hit ball on Saturday. Had to use Williams and the setup guy for the save yesterday against the Orioles, but I don't think that Yankee bullpen is necessarily taxed here coming in. So that's where, part of me wants to play the Winans over strikeouts at plus money, but it's going to, I think, keep me off here, because I don't know how long that leash is going to be for this guy. But if I were to play that, that's what I would play. I'd be playing his over strikeout prop over 4.5 at plus money.
All right, let's go to the Braves and the Mets. Mets have lost 8 of 9, including getting swept in Atlanta last week. This series is in New York. Spencer Schwellenbach will pitch for the Braves. Paul Blackburn on the hill for the Mets. Any plays in this game for you?
Yeah, now the Braves 6 games under 500, where I still don't think that they're dead necessarily for the playoffs, because
I agree.
you look at the Mets and that gaudy record 46-32, but you mentioned their struggles. So probably for the division with the Phillies there, that's gonna be really dealing into an inside straight, I think, for the Braves, but they could still make the wild card here, and they're getting Blackburn opposing them for the Mets. The pitching injuries, and that's a constant refrain for this team, no matter what year it is. But with Senga out, with Mane out, you need a guy like Blackburn to give them some length, and he has not done that, I think, really so far. So that's why you're seeing the move to Atlanta. I agree with it. Probably a 15-cent move, little rich for my blood right now, and missed it in the overnight. But I would lean Atlanta certainly on the side.
Braves, one of the biggest home road differentials. They are 22 and 15 at home and 13 and 26 on the road. We're not used to seeing that from a team like the Braves, but they've been awful on the road.
Yeah. So that's what makes it a dangerous proposition, even though I lean that way with Schwellenbach and the Braves on the road. And that's just kind of opposing Blackburn a little bit, who, it's kind of like, you got to show me. Can you give a little bit of length here? And he has not been able to get through 5. He's only made a couple starts. The second start, they wanted more length, and he fell well short of that. So not necessarily a believer. And, I don't want to really jump above what I don't think is a permanently sinking ship, but it's certainly a little bit below water over the last couple weeks are the New York Mets.
Folks, sign up for the newsletter at bettingweeklystudios.com for weekly betting tips, soccer previews, tennis brackets, and breakdowns. Make sure you check that out, bettingweeklystudios.com. Speaking of which, Betting Weekly Fast Break coming your way at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. All right, Wes, I want to get to this next game here. The Milwaukee Brewers, 7:40 Eastern start, Pirates-Brewers. You mentioned to me before the show that there's a pitcher prop you like in this one, and the Brewers are playing really good baseball. So you like Chad Patrick and the way he's pitched so far.
Yeah, I do. I like him on the over-outs, and one of the main reasons I like him in this spot, Adam, is because the Brewers, I think, are going to need some real length out of this guy. And that's what I think you look at when you're looking at a lot of these starting pitching props that I tend to play, whether it's strikeouts or particularly recorded outs. You want to see what the bullpen usage is. And Quinn Priester, by the way, who's the Brewers starter yesterday, he got lifted in the 4th inning. So the Brewers had to use like the whole darn bullpen to win 9-8 over the Twins in what was a wild game yesterday. Yep. They're still going to have a couple guys available, but I think you've got to get some length out of Patrick. And you have a Pirates team that I think, because they're struggling so bad, they're starting to grip. They're starting to stress out a little bit at the plate. So that means they're swinging a lot. And I think over the last week, they've been the most aggressive, 52.5% swing rate. So they're swinging at a lot of pitches, and that means they're swinging at some bad pitches. So I think Chad Patrick probably gives them a little bit of length here. This Pittsburgh offense and weighted runs created, that's WRC plus 64 against right-handed pitching in the last 2 weeks. So that is paltry, really, at the plate. So I think Patrick, good chance he goes 6 tonight against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, the Brewers, pretty sizable favorite, anywhere in the $1.75 range, slightly juiced to the over on the total, basically 8.5. So I think Patrick gives them some length, and he's going to have to after that bullpen got used yesterday.
Yeah, it's interesting with Patrick. I mean, he had been lights out the first 2 months. His last 2 starts are his 2 worst. Against the Cubs and Braves, he gave up 5 and 4 runs, but he still went at least 5 innings in the game when he didn't pitch that great. And obviously, you're talking about a Pirate lineup, as you said, that stinks. So I'm with you. I'm expecting him to bounce back in this game, coming off a couple of, for him, the rare bad performances, because he'd been absolutely lights out before those 2 starts.
Yeah, no question. The Pirates are just there's no help. There's no help for them. 31 and 48, and they're so anemic at the plate, because if you ever have a total on this team, you are sweating throughout. I don't care if they get like 2 runs in the first, or it's like, hey, you're in business, you're bet the over 8.5, and then you just see 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 when you cross the board, ground into double play about at least seemingly 3 or 4 times a game.
By the way, the Brewers are 18-7 in the last month, including 4 straight wins. So the Brewers, who got off to a terrible start after winning the division going away last year, are now playing really well. They're pitching really well across the board. Mizorowski, the kid they called up, has been phenomenal his first 2 starts. Patrick's been great. Freddie Garcia. So they find a way, man. The Brewers always find a way to stay in the mix.
They are such a baffling team, because when you watch them,
yeah,
at the plate, they hit a lot of balls on the ground.
Oh yeah,
so
more than anybody.
They hit into their fair share of double plays. It's like, how the hell does this team, 8 games over 500? It's like these guys don't hit at all, and they just find ways.
All right, next game, 7:40 Eastern. The Diamondbacks in Chicago to play the White Sox. Shane Smith, the Rule 5 draft pick, who's had a magnificent season, is coming off a bad start. He got blown up for 6 runs, 5 earned, and 4 1/3 his last time out. But this guy, I mean, he's not getting a lot of hype because the White Sox stink, and they've lost 9 of their last 11. They're one of the worst teams in baseball. But for a Rule 5 pick to be a starting pitcher and be this great has been shocking, considering he has very little help on an inept baseball team. Do you expect him to bounce back tonight against Eduardo Rodriguez?
I do not, and I don't think that the market does either. Even though I think Smith, to your point, has been very solid, but you've got to be like so perfect when you have that lineup not giving you a lot of run support. But we did see the overnight. This got bet up from 8.5 to 9. Probably a little late to the party on the total, but I think a way to play that total is not to necessarily chase a bad number. You can use a pitcher prop to do that. And what I would do, I don't believe Bet Rivers has this available, unfortunately, but there are some in the market. Play Shane Smith over earned runs, and that's 2.5 at plus money, like plus anywhere from $1.05 to $1.10 is what I am eyeballing the market right now. And that's the way I would look at it. 2.85 ERA for Shane Smith, but a 4.32 on the XFIP. So that tells you there's a little bit of regression. Whereas on the other side, Eduardo Rodriguez got a little positive regression. Market certainly betting it accordingly. I believe 130 was the global opener in the overnight. You're now seeing as Bet Rivers as high as 143. So Arizona certainly getting the support. I think they get the Smith. So instead of playing that bad number on the total, because I don't like it when it goes to a key number, like from 8.5 to 9. Because I feel like you've missed it a little bit. And these totals move very quickly, by the way, in the overnights. They certainly have over the last couple months. So that's a way to play the over without betting the bad number, is the Shane Smith over earned runs.
Would you consider over 4.5 strikeouts for Eduardo Rodriguez?
Yeah, that's very interesting here, because he still has, he's still an okay pitcher, but he can get hit very hard. And the thing about Rodriguez, he doesn't get as much of a length as you would want him. He's not a guy, he's not like one of those Framber Valdez that like you can leave out there forever, even if he gets hit kind of hard. You could certainly look at that. But yeah, just eyeballing it. I'm going to stay out of it. I think the market certainly is supporting at 4.5, which you're not going to find very many 4.5s now out there unless you're going to lay like 170. So I think at BR right now, over 5.5 plus 120, I could see him landing on 5. So I'm going to stay off that one.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next game on the docket. We've got the also at 7:40 Eastern. It was the Diamondbacks, White Sox. The Mariners and Twins at 7:40 Eastern. You talk about that wild game with the Brewers and Twins yesterday. So the Twins recovering off that as well. They'll face the Mariners, who had a wild weekend at Wrigley Field where a lot of runs were scored. They took 2 out of 3 against the Cubs on the road. They were in Minnesota. It's Brian Wu against Bailey Ober in this game. We said there were no great pitching matchups head-to-head. This is maybe the best of the bad lot tonight.
Yeah, I haven't bet this one yet, but of course you mentioned about the Mariners, a wild one in Wrigley over the weekend. So, the bullpen isn't completely decimated necessarily, but I'm sure that they would rather not have heavy usage tonight. And the one guy for Seattle that I think has really given them length in games is Brian Wu. They obviously haven't gotten it out of George Kirby. who's returning from the injury, and Castillo hasn't always been able to go 6 either. So they've had some difficulty. Gilbert is not routinely going 6 innings right now, so they got a good staff, but it's Wu that has been the guy. He's gone 6 innings in every single start this season, and he's pitched into the 7th, and I believe half of his starts, 14 total, so 7, and he's been pretty efficient. He's not a guy that gets hit around the yard a lot. He's a guy that gets out of jams pretty frequently. So if I were to play it, maybe Brian Wu over 18 and a half outs, but I have not yet done that. Seattle's certainly getting a little bit of support in the market over Bailey Ober. Bailey, by the way, he just got shelled in Cincinnati in his last start. So this is a guy that, he's got strikeout stuff at him, but he also is hittable and gives up a pretty large amount of hard contact. So tough for me to trust him at this point. That he's going to give you really any length, because we know in Minnesota they'll pull those starters a little bit quicker too. In Minnesota, they don't leave them out to necessarily be the sacrificial lambs, or if they get in the most minor of jams, you will see Baldelli go out there and pull those guys. So nothing for me. Would lean a little bit Brian Wu over 18 and a half outs at plus money.
Would you think about Brian Wu over 5.5 strikeouts, or is that a little too high?
Because he's not like what you would call he's not what you would call a big strikeout pitcher. He averages a little bit less than 8 over 9 innings.
Right.
So I mean, would lean that way if you made me and said you had to bet it, would certainly lean over 5.5, but I think that number's about right.
By the way, great stat on Brian Wu. You talk about him giving length. He's pitched 13 games this season. All 13, he's pitched between 6 and 7 innings.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't, 20 years ago, you would have been like, who cares? But nowadays, for a guy to
now that's like a workhorse, right?
I know, he is. He's a workhorse.
And then we see these kids
innings.
Then we see these kids in Omaha and college baseball in the College World Series, 137 pitches, or something absurd like that.
I just had my 12-year-old player at my Little League team throw 91. Let's go. We're 91 pitches 3 days after pitching. Let's go. Got to toughen these kids up.
That's the way. That's the absolute way.
We baby them more than ever, and yet there's more injuries than ever. So
gotta get that workload going.
Right.
Once we start you into high school, and then hopefully on to bigger and better things.
That's right. All right, 2 more games on the short docket tonight. These 2 on the West Coast. Let's start with the Red Sox and the Angels. Red Sox have Walker Buehler on the mound. Obviously, he has struggled. What do you make of his struggles coming off the great playoffs last year?
Yeah, I didn't anticipate, you anticipated maybe a little bit of struggle bust, but I didn't anticipate this necessarily from Walker Buehler. I thought he would be able to rebound. I know pitching in Boston, that's not exactly a pitcher's park. So it's not surprised that the numbers, have certainly gone up, but a 5.95 ERA, walking too many guys, walking about 3.5 per 9 innings. So yeah, I knew that maybe that some struggles were coming, but boy, I didn't expect it to be this pronounced here. So Boston now still right over the Mendoza line, right over that 500, as they're kind of trying to see where they are after the Devers trade. So they come off that series with San Francisco, now going to the Dodgers. I would say, just kind of eyeballing these in terms of the props, Walker Buehler. Maybe under earned runs at 2.5. I think could be a play here. You're seeing a little bit of movement to the under, even though the total is 9. That would be a lean for me. I have not bet this yet. On the other side, you have Kokanowicz for the Angels, who I think has pretty good stuff. But man, talk about a guy that doesn't give you length. He has that one big inning. It seems like every start, Adam, where he has, he's kind of cruising along through 3 innings, 45 pitches, 15 pitches an inning through 3 innings. He gets to like the 4th or the 5th. And all of a sudden you see that 30-pitch inning.
Yep.
Where he's walked 2 guys, has let in a run or 2. And then it's like, you're just, okay, man, we're just trying to get this kid to 5. where we're not really getting any length out of him. So 16 and a half, I believe, the price in terms of the recorded outs, and that seems right here. No play for me at the Big A.
Yeah. He did pitch well in his last start against the Yankees with 8 strikeouts, but you're right. Overall, he does. I mean, we just talked about Brian Wu, who goes 6 innings every start. This guy has only gone 6 innings one of his last 6 starts, and only 4 overall for the entire season. Final game on the docket. We got the Padres and the Nationals. This game in San Diego, and I know you like something with Stephen Kolek here.
Yeah, Stephen Kolek under 17 and a half outs is where I'm going here because this is where you get like a really pronounced split. When we're looking against, how does a team hit lefties or how does a team hit righties? Kolek on the other side, in terms of pitching against lefties, has not been as good. And you're getting, you might get 7 lefties. The Nats are a very lefty heavy lineup. So Kolek, in terms of the on-base average, I believe 384 to lefties and only 222 against righties. And the walk rate is higher. The strikeout rate is lower. He's just less efficient against left-handed batters. And the Nats are being a little bit more patient of late. They're not doing what the Pirates are doing, where they're just gripping and swinging at everything. They're taking their walks a little bit. Padres did not use the bullpen very much in the series over the weekend against Kansas City. So they should be relatively healthy. And, it's like, okay, once Kolek gets through 2 times through the lineup, 3rd time through the order, I could see a hook from Mike Schilt. So Stephen Kolek under 17 and a half outs for me.
To your point, his struggles against left-handed batters. You look at Washington's likely lineup tonight, they might have, including switch hitters, they might have 7 lefties in the lineup.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's trouble really for the Padres and Kolek. Not a lot of movement in the overnight in terms of the spread. I think Padres anywhere around, let's call it average 170, 175 on the money line. So not a lot of movement to the Nats here because Mitchell Parker certainly has had his struggles. I think on the Nats side, where he's about 4.6 in the ERA, not a big strikeout guy either, only 6.5 per 9 innings. So I think the best way to play that is the Kolek with the under. Ordinarily I would want to look, okay, if there's a pitcher I want to fade, do I want to play that dog money line? And, would lean that way with the Nats, but, Mitchell Parker on the road, maybe not going to give you a ton of confidence.
Real quick, Wes, it's kind of a little out of left field, so if you don't have a great answer, it's understandable. But I just happen to be looking at the MVP and Cy Young awards, and the favorites for both Cy Youngs and both MVPs are obviously, massive, especially Aaron Judge, who's minus 3,335. But I was looking at it just because Cal Raleigh is just having his magnificent season, and he's a catcher and whatever, and he's the second choice at plus 700. But you think he hits 50 home runs?
He's certainly on pace to do so right now. And one of the things about the Mariners, they hit better on the road than they do at T-Mobile Park in Seattle. And that's a historically a pitcher's park anyway. But the Mariners on the road have been very dangerous. Now they've come back to earth a little bit. They're only 2 games over 500 after that really hot start in April and early May. But yeah, I think he probably does at this point. So I don't want to say that this is over, even though you have a massive favorite, and that's the same thing in the National League. With Ohtani. PCA is going to keep getting buzz, Adam. The PCA train is very much existent on social media right now.
I mean, he's got a better WAR, does he not?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, to me, and obviously the odds are based on what you think's going to happen for the full season. But if I was voting today, PCA is the MVP. No brainer to me. He's one of the best hitters. He's the best defensive center fielder in the game, and he's one of the best base runners in the game. He does everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
crazy. No question about it, because this Cubs team, and you're a Cubs fan, but when you look up and down the lineup, it's like, do they really blow you away? No, they don't, but they produce. And, it's not a real heavy star laden lineup necessarily, but they've been tough customers, and especially PCA. I remember a couple of years ago, this guy couldn't hit at all.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're seeing him
Yeah.
every game. He's doing something.
Yeah.
Every game he's getting a clutch hit. He hits for power. He moves runners. He plays the right way, and he plays smart. And I think that maybe that's going to get rewarded here. But I don't think this is a lock for Ohtani by any stretch of the imagination. Probably going to be tough to overcome Judge in the American League with the start he got off to.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think the NL is still very much open.
I agree. Our guy Z says he likes he's got cash on PCA for the MVP, and he likes Josh Naylor tonight of the Diamondbacks over 1.5 total bases at plus 113. Can you get behind that?
I can. And now, admittedly, I'm not a guy that does a lot of hitter props.
Sure.
I'll admit that. I regret, though, I only got on one. I wish I would have got on more. I was just telling a buddy with the home run props with the guys a couple of days ago for the Chicago Cubs. I don't typically play a lot of that market, Adam, because it's so volatile. Yeah. Whereas I think with pitcher props, one thing I can do is I can look at, and I've mentioned it earlier in this program, I can look at bullpen usage. I can look at, the splits like Kolek tonight facing so many lefties. There are different little variables you can quantify, and there certainly are for hitter props too. But I think, and that's why those prices are so lucrative and why people bet into them, because they're harder to hit. Those are hard to do. Yeah. If you're able to do that, God bless you. I don't tell people how to bet if they're successful at something. If you're successful, keep being successful at it. But it is not something that I think that I'd be very good at, is doing hitter props long term.
The hardest thing to do in sports is hit a baseball. The hardest thing to bet on is bet on a hitter. I mean, it's just so the greatest home run hitters don't hit home runs 2/3 of the game. So at least, if not more, so yeah, it's tricky. All right. Let's recap what you got for today. Your two picks are pitcher props. The first one is Chad Patrick of the Brewers.
Chad Patrick over 17.5 outs. Brewers used the entire bullpen yesterday to have to survive against the Twins 9-8. I think they need some length up there in Milwaukee. So Chad Patrick over 17.5 outs. And then Stephen Kolek, who I just mentioned for the Padres, under 17.5 outs. Yeah. I think Padre bullpen in pretty good shape, and all those lefties against Kolek could get him into jams. And then a bonus one, because it is not available at our sponsor Bet Rivers, but it might be later in the day. Shane Smith over 2.5 earned runs, and you're starting to see that total take even more money right now at Arizona and the White Sox as we speak. It moved to 9, like minus 115. You're now seeing some minus 125, minus 130 in the market. So this is all over money on the South Side tonight.
Thanks to Z and Alex for producing today. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. For Wes, I'm Adam. We'll talk to you next time. Betting Weekly Fast Break coming up in about 30 minutes. We'll see you tomorrow on Betting Weekly Hardball. See you, everybody.